Well, don't wait until you're 50 to start thinking about your health. Start as early as possible. We really start paying for the decisions of our 20s and 30s when we get to our 50s. It's like your hormone levels drop, your body's a little bit older, and we just can't overcome all of those bad decisions anymore like we could in our 20s and 30s. So you may not see the results of those so much in your 20s and 30s, but start now.
Hey guys, today we have an amazing and very fit guest with us. He is Zane Griggs. Zane has been helping people improve their metabolic health and fitness as a personal trainer since 1998. He's the host of the Healthy After 50 podcast, where he discusses practical strategies for unlocking optimal health and longevity. He also co-authored the book Kicking Ass After 50 with Dr. Ken Berry that gives us really simple and step-by-step guide to become optimally healthy and fit after 50. I highly recommend you guys to get a copy. Zane's main focus is to empower people to take charge of their health through the lifestyle decisions they make every day. Besides all that, Zane is a really good human being, guys. I met him and I know this. He's one of the nicest people you ever meet. So I'm so happy to invite Zane to the show. Thanks, Zane, for coming to the show.
BNS, thank you for having me here. It's an honor. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Zane. Zane, before we go into the questions, can you share where can people connect with you?
Sure. I'm most active on Instagram. It's at Zane Griggs Fitness. I'm on Twitter some as well at Zane Griggs. But if you want to just find where all my channels or my podcast is, go to zanegriggs.com and you'll see everything I'm doing and you can click from there.
Thank you, Zane. Zane, my first question is, why most well-intentioned physicians are unknowingly giving us advice that makes us sick?
That's a big question. That's a big question. Well, it's how they're educated. Doctors generally have very little nutrition education in med school, maybe 2 to 5 hours at most. And most of that education is flawed. And so this brings us back to why all of our nutrition guidelines and our recommendations, especially stemming from the US, are so flawed. They are really driven by the processed food industry. And that sounds like a conspiracy, but it's actually been very well documented that the processed food industry has had a tremendous influence on the government bodies as well as the academic researchers who are making these recommendations. Going all the way back to the 60s, when a foundation called Sugar Foundation actually paid Harvard nutritionists to blame saturated fat for heart disease rather than sugar. They basically had them write papers that favored there was research in both camps of sugar causing heart disease and then saturated fat causing heart disease. And the Sugar Foundation paid these researchers at Harvard to write their papers favoring the ones that showed saturated fat was the cause of heart disease, and to discredit the studies that showed sugar was the cause of heart disease. Well, that sounds like a long time ago, but one of those Harvard researchers became the head of the USDA and was very much instrumental in creating our initial guidelines here in the US, our initial, what we call the food pyramid, which came out in the 70s and early 80s. So the man who was paid off by the Sugar Foundation had an instrumental effect in creating our nutrition guidelines. And from that point, we have organizations like the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which receives a tremendous amount of funding from the processed food industry. And this has been documented. The committee that writes our dietary guidelines was shown in a paper last year that 95% of the members had conflicts of interest with the processed food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and other entities that are involved in selling us these guidelines that profit from our purchase of processed food. And so when we have the processed food industry paying for and giving direction to the people who are writing our guidelines, our guidelines are biased. They're going to be promoting processed food, anything that fits into their framework, and really that is where we've gone in the wrong direction. And so when the education is so pervasive from all the academic higher learning, all the universities, all of the doctors, this is their education, is being written by processed food companies, we have to know that those guidelines and that this information, this education, is not in our best interest. It's in the best interest of industry. So that's a
Yes.
long-winded answer, but it's kind of like there's some history there, and it really shows. I mean, this has been documented in couple papers that just came out last year, but the whole story with the Harvard researchers, that was in the British Medical Journal, the Journal of American Medicine, and published in the New York Times. I mean, these are not conspiracy theories. These are documented facts and transactions.
Thank you, Zane. Zane, when people cross 50, many reduce their personal expectations of fitness and just try to manage the symptoms of aging. Like, how is the paradigm about health after 50 is changing?
Well, we're trying to change it. We're trying to change the paradigm so that, well, I would say traditionally people think 50 is the time you're over the hill, right? It's the time to let off the gas, whether it's your health or your career, kind of cruise a little bit, maybe spend a little less time because, being having a beach body, right? Or having some kind of, big bench press or be really strong is kind of behind you. That's something that young men pursue or young people pursue. And so you're thinking, well, why do I care? I'm not worried about having abs at 55 or 60 years old. But I think we need to change that because it's about our health. It's not about, it shouldn't be about vanity metrics. It should be about our health. And that's really the paradigm I'm trying to change because it doesn't have to be that way. Many of these diseases, these metabolic diseases are preventable, and they're taking us out earlier and earlier. We're seeing younger and younger people falling prey to obesity and type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease and heart disease. And what I try to convey to people is that this isn't just about vanity. This is about how well you show up for your family. It's how you show up in your career. And think about what would another 10 or 15 years of optimal health mean to you financially or with your relationships with your family, or what you could do, any passion you have, you want to pursue, what kind of impact do you want to have in that part of your life. If you're encumbered, if you're being held back by a preventable disease, you're limiting your full potential and the impact you can have while you're still here. At a point in your life when you have the most wisdom, the most experience, the greatest amount of influence, you have the most potential to do a lot of great things. But you could be held back by something that you could prevent with just some simple lifestyle habits. And so I think that's the paradigm wide shift, is that stop thinking that your health is over. You don't have to worry about something after 50 because you're not worried about looking a certain way. It's not about how you look. It's about how you perform.
Absolutely, Zen. Thank you for answering that. Zen, why should we get our diet right in the first place before changing any changes in exercise? I mean, before beginning any new exercise regimen.
Well, you know, that it's diet is something that we do every day, right? It's something we eat every day, and that's the most consistent habit we have, and it's the one that I believe makes the greatest impact. Maybe when you're young, when you're 20s or maybe your 30s, you can out exercise some bad dietary choices. But once you get in your 40s, 50s, or older, you really can't out exercise bad dietary choices. The other thing is when you start exercising, you're going to stimulate some appetite, right? You might get a little bit hungrier. And if you haven't corrected your diet and all of the hormonal biochemistry going on in your body that is determined by your diet, then you're just going to be hungrier for more bad food, right? So don't stimulate this appetite before you've corrected the diet. Let's get the diet right. That's going to have the greatest impact on your hormones, on your sense of satiety, or so that you're not hungry all the time. And it's going to really start correcting the things we want to put the most focus on, which is your correct, your blood sugar, right? Your fat storage, how well you create energy, and just how you feel. That really does start with your diet. So let's put first things first. Start with diet, start implementing exercise, but diet is the one, again, that impacts us every single day. You might exercise 3 times a week, but you eat every day, you eat a couple times a day. That's going to have the greatest impact on your health.
Yes, Jen. Thank you. Zen, what is the best form of exercise for the people over 50?
That's a great question. So it can become very individualized depending on if someone has injuries and so forth. But some real basic strength training is important in order to help us retain muscle and bone density. Because as we age, certain hormones, like especially growth hormone and other hormones that help us retain muscle and keep our bones strong, start to diminish. So we really need to engage muscles, and those muscles then pull on bones, which creates the bone density, uh, to make sure we don't lose that muscle as we age. Muscle is an incredible resource to us to keep us strong, keep us balanced. If we do fall, it keeps us from breaking, right? And we all know we need a certain amount of strength just to get through our day, whether it's to climb a set of stairs, play with grandchildren, play with kids, and just be active. And so that muscle is going to diminish if we don't use it. It's truly use it or lose it. So we can spend a little bit of time engaging that muscle in an intense way, but it can be very simple. It doesn't have to be a bodybuilder routine. Some really simple compound movements that use a lot of muscle groups. Working your whole body 2 or 3 times a week for half an hour is sometimes enough to do that. And I think beyond that, it's just important to be active. Whether you're walking, you find a sport that you enjoy, but find something you like that makes you happy when you do it, right? That you enjoy, so that you want to get outside, get in the sun, sweat a little bit, breathe some air, and just keep yourself moving. That's it. So I think the combination of a little bit of intense exercise, and then as often as possible, find something you enjoy to get out and just move in a moderate way. Doesn't have to be super intense, but something you enjoy that's fun and just keeps your blood moving and keeps you active in a way that reminds your body that you still need it. And I think that's what's so important about it.
Yes, Jen. Even in the book, also, you mentioned about the forms of exercise one can do over 50. And I really
Right.
like that part. And guys, if you are seeing this, this is not something that I'm saying because to impress Zen or something, but really, if you can get the book, get it. Because the book is like an instruction manual, actually. You will see step by step guide to do everything like diet, exercise, and everything. So, thank you for writing that book with Ken Berry, Zen.
Oh, we were excited to write it. We wanted to keep it as simple to implement as possible. We go into some level of detail in explaining why
Yeah.
these things are important, and we try to make that as simple as possible to understand. But when it comes to the steps to put in place, we really try to keep it simple and concise. And here's, if you're just at the beginning of your health journey, things that you can put into place right away. It's not like you have to create a part-time job or turn your life upside down to start this. Really simple steps you should be able to implement so they're sustainable. So something you can maintain for a long period of time without feeling like like you turned your life upside down. So we try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yes, Jen, thank you. Zen, how low testosterone levels can interfere with both physical and mental performance?
Oh, wow. Well, yes, testosterone is very important for men and women. So women have a significant amount of testosterone as well. It's one of the actually, the more dominant uh, hormones in their body. They just have a tenth of what men have, and for men, it's our primary sex hormone, and it is what helps us retain muscle mass and strength. It can also help with reducing inflammation in our bodies. Mentally, when your testosterone is low, you might notice just a low drive in general, kind of a low motivation. You might get some brain fog, especially in the afternoon, at the end of towards the end of the day. You just start feeling a little less energetic, a little fatigued, maybe a little harder to focus or concentrate, and it can even affect your sleep. It can, if your testosterone is low, that means your inflammation might be a little bit higher, and it tends to cause sleep disruptions. So it really has a tremendous impact on more than just being, having some hunky beach body. It really affects our energy and our internal drive to really move, the things we want to go after. We all have things we want to accomplish, and that low testosterone can really interfere with your desire and your mental focus to get those things done.
Thank you for explaining, Zane. Zane, why taking regular blood work is important, and what are some of the blood tests that people over 50 can take in general?
Well, there's a lot of tests to take. There's several that I would focus on. It's important because that is a metric for what's going on the inside that we're not always aware of. Because sometimes our health problems, really, they can start. We don't always see them happening. We don't always have symptoms right away while they're forming in our bodies. When we start having hormonal imbalances, that can take years to develop into an obvious symptom. So looking at, and when you start making changes, many times the changes can start happening in your blood work before they start seeing them before they become very obvious on the outside. And so it's a great way to see if things are moving, whether you're making changes in the right direction or if your lifestyle is taking you in the wrong direction. One of the most important ones to include that many doctors do not is called fasting insulin. Fasting insulin is a hormone that helps control your blood sugar. And if your fasting insulin level starts to become elevated, so you have more insulin in your blood than you should, than is optimal, then that is the beginning stages of what is called insulin resistance, or what leads to type 2 diabetes. But that fasting insulin level can be elevated before you even see changes in your blood sugar. So if you can catch that issue before your blood sugar becomes out of control and becomes elevated out of normal ranges, because you're testing the fasting insulin, for instance, then you can catch that before it becomes a real problem, before you start needing medications to manage it. And then you can start managing that your insulin levels with diet and exercise and good sleep, and get that under control before it becomes obvious. You want to look at hormone levels. It's a great way to, like we mentioned, testosterone, but any hormones. Watch those in your blood work. Triglycerides are another important one. When those get elevated out of range, it's a beginning sign of that insulin resistance again, that those symptoms that lead to metabolic disease. So there's a number of hormone and blood markers that you can test for. That in the list, we would be here all day talking about them, but those are a couple that many doctors just, I think, do not pay enough attention to or don't know how to interpret. And so we try to include those in the book to really empower the reader to be their own advocate, to really take charge of their own health, so that they can come to their doctor and say, I really want to take a look at this. I think this is going to have an impact on my health long term, and I'd like to include this in my blood work. And so we make sure to include that. But I'd say fasting insulin is probably one of the most important to make sure you include, that your doctor may not be.
Thank you, Zane. Zane, why do you think retirement is the beginning of a downward spiral?
Ooh, this is a hot topic for me, because I see men, especially when we don't have a purpose, when we don't have something we're chasing, we don't have a pursuit, then we start dying on the inside. Men And I think a lot of people. I don't want to just say this about men, but I think men in particular are wired um, to build, to create, right? To serve in a way to that we provide for other people, or we create um, something bigger than ourselves, right? And when we retire and we're left to, we don't have direction. We don't. What are we building? What are we creating? What are we're left to basically just try to entertain ourselves, right? Or to fill our day with sort of meaningless chores that aren't fulfilling. And so then when we don't have that drive, we don't see a purpose in staying healthy or in staying sharp or continuing to learn. And I think whether it's work or your own business, or just find a cause or something that's meaningful to you to put your energy into. If you do need to retire from your work, find something that drives you. Find something that gives you a reason to get out of bed, that's bigger than you, that's more important than uh, than just mindless uh, entertainment and chores to fill your day. Give yourself something to build or pursue or to work towards. And I think that's going to help you stay alive. I think once we start giving into that, that kind of sense of you have no more purpose, and you start filling it in with those meaningless chores, we start to die. And I think that depression and that lack of purpose really has a physical effect on us that isn't being accounted for. It's not being measured, and nobody wants to talk about. But I do think it's the beginning of it's like a slow death. It's a slow death they can't measure.
Yeah.
But I believe, if mentally, if we're not chasing something, there's a part of us that's slowly dying.
Then I really hope that this acts as a wake up call for many people. Thank you.
Mm.
Then, what are some warning signals that body shows to the people over 50, telling them to take their health seriously?
Well, I think, and again, as I said, this is starting even earlier than 50. But if you're at 50 and you're noticing you've got weight that just won't budge, if you have, you've got a what we call visceral fat. So visceral fat's a big one because it's not just this fat that's around like it might be on your arms or legs, just under the skin. Visceral fat builds up under the muscle, around the organs in your torso. And what you'll notice is that fat will start to push your stomach out. And you may not have like billowy, foldable under the skin fat around your stomach, but you'll have this pressure pushing underneath where it starts to grow underneath and your waist starts getting bigger. And that waist size statistically has been shown to be a risk factor for metabolic disease and other heart disease and diabetes. But that visceral fat has an impact on your blood sugar and has effect on your organ function. And it's very dangerous. It's much more hormonally impactful than the fat that's under our skin. The fat under our skin doesn't look good, and we may not like it because it makes us look soft, but it doesn't have a great amount of impact on our health or our hormones like the visceral fat does. And so that's definitely something to watch out for. If your blood sugar or blood pressure start to become elevated out of normal ranges, that's a big warning sign as well. You need to something is not functioning properly in your body, and begins again with hormones. So you definitely want to take charge of that. So if you notice high blood pressure, high blood sugar, large waist circumference, those are 3 symptoms of metabolic disease. So even if you're not medicated for one of these problems yet, but you're noticing it starting to creep up, if you don't do something to reverse those, at some point you will need medication to control those, and it's probably not what you want to do. So your best bet is to start taking charge of those with your lifestyle choices, with your diet, with your sleep, with your movement. But those are I think the big ones that 50-year-olds just need to watch out for: the increased waist size, increased blood sugar, or blood pressure, which is an easy one to take as well.
Thank you so much, Zain. Zain, I think now it is the best time to ask this question. So, what are the top 3 changes people over 50 can make to become healthy?
Ooh, top 3. Okay. Uh, well, the three areas we talk about in the book are diet, exercise, and sleep. But those are huge topics. So it's really simple steps, I would say, for diet. Let's just take a simple step for each one. With diet, I would say if you're used to eating many times a day or you're hungry all the time, that's something that you want to correct. But you can do the first step, I would say, would be limiting your eating to 3 meals a day or less, primarily focusing on whole food. In other words, avoiding processed food. Processed food is what has taken us in the wrong direction with our metabolic health. If we go back 100 years before we had all this processed food, we didn't have all these problems. We didn't have the obesity, the heart disease, the diabetes. So if you can get whole food meals, so single ingredient food, stuff you would have had from a farm or something from 100, 150 years ago, that should be your 90% of your diet, if not more. So 3 meals with whole food. With sleep, give yourself at least 7 hours of sleep per night. And find a set sleep schedule so that you adhere to at most of the time. So 5, 6, 7, hopefully 7 nights a week. You're going to bed around the same time and getting up around the same time to let your body learn that rhythm, that circadian rhythm. So it knows when you're supposed to be sleeping, when you're supposed to be waking up, and you don't have these times when you're waking up in the middle of the night because you have a confused circadian rhythm. So give yourself a real set sleep schedule and adhere to it. And then with movement, as I said before, start simple. 2 or 3 sessions of some sort of strength training a week. Could be just as little as 30 minutes. And then just get out and move and enjoy. Find something you enjoy. Find people you like being around, and just get out and move. So I know that was more than just 3 things, but those are the 3 areas I would address, but with real simple steps.
Well, we are always happy to receive more, so thank you so much, Zen. Zen, you are 52, right?
Correct.
You are one of the fittest people I have ever seen in my life, in real life and anywhere. So, what would a sample ideal diet plan looks like for a person who is over 50? Or a better question would be, how do you eat?
Well, now I wanna make sure. Okay, so how I would coach someone to if someone is having some of these issues with weight or with blood sugar issues, something like that, or something we're trying to correct metabolic disease, I would not have them eat exactly the way I eat, because your maintenance diet is not the same as when you're trying to change something or trying to turn something around. So when I'm helping someone move from, say, a not so fit to a more fit state, as I mentioned before, try to get them down to 3 meals a day maximum. So eat enough to satiety and then stop, and so you're eating enough to get to each of those 3 meals. And those meals should be within, ideally, less than 12 hours a day. So keep that window of eating 12 hours. If you can get it down to 10 hours, even better. So somewhere between like 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. as an eating window is great. But if it's 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., that can work well too. 3 meals, avoid processed food. But I put a lot of focus on protein and making sure that your protein levels are high enough to sustain muscle and create satiety. So the food choices would be, I'm a huge advocate of animal protein and animal fat. So you can go with your weight or your ideal weight in grams of protein as a goal. And if you get close to that, you're going to be doing very well. So if you weigh your ideal weight, or you currently weigh and you want to maintain that, say 180 pounds, or what is that? So 80 kilos, 85 kilos. You would want to eat approximately 150 to 180 grams of protein. That is my recommendation. And that may sound like a lot to a lot of people if they're not used to eating that. But it's something you could work up to. And I don't try to tell people to just turn their whole life around all at once, but slowly start making these changes over time, and your body will adapt and you'll get used to it. So it's sustainable. But I would prioritize protein at every single meal. So I would say, at least, so many people may not know what that looks like, but if you're looking in terms of grams of meat, like goat, for instance, or lamb, you could say, for a guy especially, you're going to eat a little bit more. Uh, Maybe 225 grams of goat would give you about 45 to 50 grams of protein. So if you ate that amount 3 times in a day, you would be at that, about 150 grams of protein. That's a great goal. If you're just starting out, that's a great goal to shoot for. If you're a little bit smaller, you're female, and you're thinking, oh, I just want to weigh 120 pounds, 130 pounds, just reduce that a little bit. You might be eating 150, 175 grams of goat at a meal, and that would get you 3 times, and that would get you closer to the 120, 130 grams of protein. So that is something to prioritize. And from there, anything outside of that would be whole food, whether that's vegetables, if it's fruit, based on what your goals are and what you're able to digest, what you feel good digesting. So definitely listen to your body when you eat. If you eat something and it seems to cause some distress, some digestive distress, maybe, hey, that vegetable doesn't work for me, but something else might. But I also recommend people, if their goal is weight loss or trying to correct blood sugar, to really reduce the starches in their diet and limit those starches. Those really need to be managed. So we're trying to increase protein. Any of the fat that comes along with that protein is fine. It's healthy fat, but limit the starches. And so we really want to focus on getting those 3 meals in place, prioritizing protein each of those 3 meals, and limiting starches and whatever else you eat, whole food. So that's about as simple as it can get. And that is not far from how I eat. I prioritize protein. I will eat maybe a little more fruit than I would recommend to someone who's trying to correct disease, because I'm trying to recover from my workouts. And that allows me to hold on to a little bit more muscle weight. But so if someone's very lean and they're trying to grow muscle, they might want to eat a little more of the fruit or a starchy veggie. But correcting disease, you pull back. So it can be tailored to whatever your needs are and your body type.
Thank you so much, Zane. Thank you so much. Zane, if we have to cut off just one food from our diet for optimal health, what would that food be?
Oh, one food. Well, it's actually an ingredient. Well, BNS, that's a tough question. Processed food. So something with multiple ingredients is really the big, to me, the big problem, the biggest problem. And so that is made up of processed grains, processed sugars or added sugars, and processed oils. And so the oils are just as important to eliminate as the sugar and the very highly processed grains. These are what's hurting our body. So and that's why I emphasize whole food. The processed food that has come into our food system, the U.S., and now I think has really made its way into your country, India as well, with these large corporations like Mondelez and Kraft Heinz and Kellogg's and General Mills. They are making their foods are what's making us sick. So rather than say one specific food like this food item, I think there's you go back in history, we've always eaten a variety. People have eaten a variety of foods without this level of disease. Depending on what grew or what was available in their region, right, or what was normal in their culture. What has changed is the amount of processed food that is now in our diet that's being mass produced and normalized. And so this is simple, this is convenient, It's easy. Here it is in a package. Oh yeah, it's all great. And they put little emblems on there to make us think it's good for us, little happy sunshine faces and heart healthy symbols. And it's just advertising. And so if we can eliminate processed food and stick to whole food, something like, again, like I said before, that comes off the farm, we're set. We are in a much better place. You have just moved your health tremendous amount in the right direction. And from there, you can figure out, what's right for you, what combinations of whole food you need. But I think the processed food is the big, ugly monster that we really have to get rid of.
Thank you so much, Zane. Zane, as a person who is above 50, what would you recommend to the people who are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s?
Well, don't wait until you're 50 to start thinking about your health. Start as early as possible. Uh, we really start paying for the decisions of our 20s and 30s when we get to our 50s. It's like your hormone levels drop, your body's a little bit older, and we just can't overcome all of those bad decisions anymore like we could in our 20s and 30s. So you may not see the results of those so much in your 20s and 30s, but start now. Uh, what you do now sets you up for health in your 50s. I'm in the kind of condition I am at 52 because I started thinking about my health and figuring out what my diet should be and exercising in my 20s. And so it's much easier to maintain an optimal level of health if you always have something going, even if it's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you're at least managing it and you're figuring that out and you're getting it 80% right most consistently. Over time, it pays off exponentially. That time added to your consistency is what really will set you up to be healthy as you get older, rather than ignoring it when you're young and then trying to play catch up when you get older at a time when your body's just a little slower to respond. Put in those years ahead of time of good diet, of exercise, of paying attention to your sleep. And you'll see your body will pay you back in the best possible way.
Thank you, Zain. Thank you so much. Zain, I was so surprised when I read the book that at the end of the book, you have almost like 50 pages of research. Can you talk about that? Like, why did you do that?
Well, I did that because we did that, I should say. Dr. Kimberry and I wanted to include that because many times these are studies that people don't hear in the mainstream. The studies and the science and the articles we hear in the mainstream are what's selling the mainstream message, which is those nutrition guidelines that are so really created by the processed food industry. They're paid for. They pay for the research. They're funding, as I said, the people who are writing the recommendations. And so the studies that we hear are the ones that they've paid for to find a result that they wanted. And so we wanted to include research to not only back up our what we're saying in the book, but also to give some, some something for you to show if you want to, someone to share it with their family, with their doctors. Like, look, there's other research showing that meat from a ruminant animal is actually very good for us. So we're not worried about saturated fat. That it's these oils that are actually causing disease, or that uh, exercise is beneficial for long-term, for mental health, not just physical health, or sleep, all the important things about sleep. We wanted to arm people, to empower people to take charge of their health. And we have to do that with knowledge. So they're not just saying something or believing something because we said it, but to show that there is a credible research behind it and to give them the resources. So it's not, many times in bibliographies in the back of a book, you'll see they have little references that nobody can understand, and they're written tiny, super tiny. So we wrote it in normal size font, links and titles so that people could find it if they wanted to, with a little summary so they understood what the study was saying and why it's important. But it's really to put these studies that reinforce what we're talking about in the book in a place that is accessible and easy to find for the reader, so they feel empowered as well with that knowledge.
Thank you, Zen. And especially many people will be confident because now they have like a armory within them to show. So, yeah, thank you,
Correct.
Zen. Then some people might be eating whole foods, like 3 times per day, everything, but they use lots of seed oils. What do you think is the role of seed oils in ill health?
Wow. Seed oils are really very, very detrimental to our health. And they create a lot of inflammation in our bodies. And I think that's probably one of the greatest factors. These oils are, if I can get a little nerdy for just a second, but not all fats are the same. There's different fatty acids that make up all of our dietary fats, and they're in different concentrations in these fats. So whether you're talking about coconut oil or canola oil or soybean oil or butter, ghee, ghee is incredible. Butter and ghee are incredible fats. They have a very small amount of what's called linoleic acid, or this omega-6 acid, that is so dominant in the seed oils. And that's what makes the seed oils so detrimental. So in small amounts, our bodies can use this linoleic acid, or this omega-6 fatty acid, uh, in single digit amounts. So it's like 3%, 6% in our diet. That's what we would traditionally would have had in our diet, say going back 150, 200 years ago or more. It would have been in some nuts. It would have been here and there. We would have eaten it in a whole food, small amounts, or small amounts in whatever, fish and so forth, or goat that you might be eating is in very small amounts. These seed oils have it in large concentrations, where it makes up 20 to 70% of the fat in these oils. And what has been shown is that since in the US, for instance, since the 50s, the amount of this inflammatory oil that's being stored in our body fat has increased. It was, say, in the 50s, it was around 9% of our body fat. It has increased to, in 2008, it was found to be as much as 22%. So it is more than doubled in our body. And this is during that time span, we're also seeing the increase in disease, in obesity and heart disease and diabetes. So the correlation is strong between the increase of these oils in our food system and in our storing in our body fat, because we can't make this fat. We can only eat it. It's in our bodies because we're eating it. Our body typically stores fat as saturated or monounsaturated. It will not store it as this polyunsaturated linoleic acid. A small amount of it in our bodies is helpful for certain processes. A large amount of it is very inflammatory, and it actually can reduce our energy levels. It is shown to actually damage the cell and affect the ability for it to make what's called cellular energy, or ATP. It reduces the amount of energy that cell can create. So you might have 100 calories, for instance, from ghee and 100 calories from this omega-6 fat. And the omega-6 fat is going to cause your cell to only put out 40 to 60% of the energy that you want to use, right, to run your body, that the fat from butter would. So it's increasing inflammation, it's reducing energy. And if you have reduced energy from your food, what are you going to do? You're going to eat more, or you're going to be less active. So you have reduced energy, you're less active, you're kind of hungry still because you didn't get the energy out of it that you needed, and you're inflamed. You are not a happy person. And you're probably going to want to go eat something else because you have low energy, you're tired, you're not happy. So you're going to start eating more garbage. Not a good cycle. So we really want to avoid these seed oils because of that increased inflammation from this linoleic acid. These are processed oils. These are not natural oils. These are not oils that would have occurred in nature. They're extracted through a chemical basis. They're usually oxidizing or rusting. Let's say rust for oils, or oxidizing from the moment they're processed and put in those bottles or put into the food. These are not good fats. Stick with butter, or if you want coconut oil as a plant source, it's almost the same concentration of linoleic acid as butter is. It's a good alternative if butter or ghee are not available. But those would be my preferred fats to avoid disease.
Brilliant, Zane. Thank you so much. Zane, what is possible for a person who is above 50 physically? Are there any limitations that we need to keep in mind?
So the honest answer is yes, there are some limitations. We don't recover as quickly as we would have when we were in our 20s and 30s, so you might need a little more recovery time. I think you need to prioritize sleep a little more. Sleep is very important as we get older, and it seems to be the thing that when I speak to my clients who are over 50, that they're noticing more and more problems with sleep. They're producing fewer of the hormones that help us stay asleep, and that's just part of age. But we're also carrying a lot of career stress. Maybe we have a lot of kids at home, family stress. So managing our sleep is very important for our recovery. But in general, um, a 20 or 30-year-old might go to the gym 5, 6 days a week. They're hitting it hard every time. They're doing great. They're like little super people. They don't realize how good they have it. When you get older, you realize, oh my gosh, how does he keep going? Why does he have so much energy? It's normal to have a little less energy, to take a little longer to recover. So you might allow yourself, if you go do a workout or do something that's strenuous, give yourself time. It's okay. Give yourself time to recover. Allow yourself a little more time to sleep. Make sure your nutrition is on point. You cannot get away with eating the fast food and the junk food that the 20 and 30-year-old can. You need to be a little more conscious about all these things because your body it's going to be more sensitive to it. And so making sure your diet is whole food, making sure you're getting enough sleep, and that you give yourself enough recovery from your exercise, from your activities, is not something to feel guilty about. It's just where you are in life. And it means that you're going to have to use a little more of your wisdom and experience and your discipline that you've earned over these last several decades to be more consistent with your healthy lifestyle habits.
Thank you, Zane. Last two questions. So, how to best manage sleep?
Ooh. Sleep is under attack, in my opinion, right now. From work, from our devices. Uh, Managing sleep starts with setting a schedule, as I mentioned before. So have a bedtime pretty much close to the same every night with a wake up time as well. That's pretty consistent. What can throw that off are things like when we eat, how much sunlight we're getting, how much time we get outside, and small screens. So one of the main things that can affect our sleep are screens, as I mentioned. Let's start with the screens. The small screens like tablets, laptops, phones that can be very close to our face, those stimulate our brain through our eyes like it's daylight. It puts out a certain ultraviolet light that's like daytime. And so it tells our brain, oh, the sun's still up. It's not time to go to sleep yet. So it can affect our circadian rhythm, not just in going to sleep, but it can affect it even after you go to sleep in the way that disrupting your circadian rhythm. So we really want to limit our exposure to screens, close up small screens, to 2 or 3 hours, ideally 3 hours before we're going to bed. We really want to limit that. Just maybe start wearing a blue light blocker if you have access to some sort of blue light blocking glasses, or put something on that screen that filters out the blue light or the ultraviolet light. I think mealtime is also important. You really don't want to eat a heavy meal within 2 or 3 hours of bedtime either, because your digestion is going to be working hard to digest that food. Your system's going to be trying to digest that food, and it's going to elevate your body temperature. It might elevate your energy, your blood sugar. And so we want to make sure you've had ample time to digest that heavy meal before going to bed, to really let your body settle down and rest. And believe it or not, getting a good exposure to sun during the day also impacts our rhythm at night. So trying to get outside as early as possible to get exposure of the sun on your face, on your eyes, so that it tells your body, okay, this is wake up time. This is when the sun is up. And that starts setting your internal clock, your circadian rhythm, that internal sleep clock. Okay, early sunshine, we know that in about 12, 14 hours, where you have to start settling down to go to bed. So getting as much exposure to sun during the day is very important, but especially as early as you can, get that. And then it's also helpful if you can get outside at sunset, enjoy the sunset. It's not only going to be peaceful to you and just feel good and just be something you enjoy watching. Your brain is going to recognize that sunset as, okay, the day is ending. We're seeing more red light coming through in that sunset, and it's telling your brain, okay, it's time to start resting, because it's noticing the shift from day to night. And so those are kind of signals that we kind of take for granted, but those are signals we had traditionally as humans. We've always had until our modern era with electric lights. We're working inside all the time, and we're throwing off our clocks with sort of our busy schedule. And I really think what I tell my clients who are like very busy, very career guys or corporate guys, or they own their own businesses, and there's a drive there to work and work hard, and that's great. But there's got to be a time to sort of calm things down before you go to bed, or your work brain's going to keep going. So give yourself a couple hours before bed to just move away from work activities. You can still read, you can still do things that are productive, but stay away from work or anything that causes that kind of stress or stressful thinking. And let your brain just sort of calm down before you go to bed. If you're going straight from work emails and trying to close deals or try to create some sort of document, and you to go to bed, your brain's going to still be spinning. And so give yourself time, spend some time with family or friends, or read a book you enjoy, or look at something that you want to learn, but just it's more pleasurable. It's not stress related or work related. And I think really letting your brain calm down in that regard can be helpful in getting yourself into a deep sleep earlier in the night.
Thank you so much, Zane. Zane, last question. Would you like to issue a 7-day challenge to our subscribers?
Well, that's a great idea. I'm so glad you mentioned it. 7-day challenge. Yes. See how you feel. It's a 7-day challenge. 7-day challenge. 3 meals a day, whole food only. So if it comes in a box, a bag, or a bottle, and I mean a bottle as in not a bottle of water, obviously, but a bottle where you have several ingredients written on it, so a mixture of sodas and things like that, don't drink it. Don't eat it. 1 week, 7 days of single ingredient food. It doesn't have to be a perfect diet, but just single ingredient. Avoid processed food for 1 week. See how you feel. See how your body, your joints feel if you have less fluid in them. See if your stomach doesn't feel better. And if your energy level doesn't increase and your sleep improve. No processed food for 7 days.
Done. Thank you so much,
All
Zane.
right.
Zane, thank you so much for coming to the show and helping us to become healthy.
It was my pleasure. My pleasure, BNS. I am at your disposal. Anything you need.
Thank you, Zane.
If your health is important to you, you need to subscribe to BNS Goku Great so you can keep kicking ass.